All right, Alexander, we have got a recession in Europe, definitely a recession in Germany. The euro actually lost parity with the dollar, and it's now weaker than the dollar. I remember when the euro was at 120, 115. I remember when it was at 2.
Yeah.
Boy, has the euro just lost all value.
Yeah.
Germany's just a complete basket case. Schultz runs to Canada in order to look for natural gas, and Trudeau tells him there is no natural gas. Exports from Canada to Germany doesn't make sense, but we can offer you hydrogen fuel. So he goes all that way to sign a hydrogen fuel agreement. Meanwhile, the turbine is still stuck in Germany, and the Nord Stream 1 is, I guess, on day 3 of the maintenance, so it's now actually at 0 gas to Germany, and if they do get it back up, it'll just go to 20%, not even the 60% before the turbine issue. What a complete disaster. But Germany's scrambling for weapons. That's the concern. How do we get weapons to Ukraine? There's this tug of war to get weapons. It's the narrative for the Germans, and they seem to be going along with this, much to my surprise, is don't take a shower, use a washcloth, don't heat your home. We'll have public heating centers before you go home, and stuff like this. This is Germany. This is supposedly the crown jewel of the European Union, the EU economy.
Yes. I mean, do bear in mind, though, that it is winter. That it is summer at the moment. We've had warm temperatures, so, we don't quite need the heating that you might do in winter. But putting all that aside, I mean, a climate of hysteria will take you quite a long way. And, of course, it has in Germany, and it has in Europe generally, it has in Britain. Except, of course, that if you actually look at the opinion polls in Germany, things are now starting to change. And the SPD, that's Scholz's party, it's crumbling. I mean, it was never particularly popular. It peaked at about 25%. Now it's fallen down to 19%, and it's still falling. Scholz has basically lost his support in Germany. Now, the Greens, because, they were the party that was going to take on Putin and that they were going to obliterate Putin, well, they leapt up at the time of the election last year. They were on 15%, then they surged up to 23%. But since then, they flatlined, and now they're starting to dip. And it's not a big dip, but I suspect we're going to see that dip further. And the only party at the moment that's actually growing, who's supporting Germany is growing, by the way, is the AfD. Not by much, but you're beginning to see the upticks there. So, I'm not saying there's been a massive change of feeling in Germany. But there should be, because the longer this goes on for, the more the obsession with Ukraine and Russia continues, the more damage to the long-term structure of the European economy, of the German economy, there is going to be. Germany now almost definitely is in recession. So I understand is France, where the mood, by the way, is very different. People there are much more critical about the whole Ukraine narrative than people are in Germany. Italy is probably in recession also. As you said, the euro is losing value. Inflation is rising. The prices in Germany, producer prices in Germany, shot up by something like 37% last month. If this goes on for much longer, it's not just going to be irretrievable. To a great extent, I think it already is. It's going to become catastrophic.
How does Germany's collapse, which is now looking more certain than ever? They don't seem very interested, the German government, to be quite honest, to fix things. No. That's the way I see it. They pay a lot of lip service to the situation, but they don't really seem interested in finding a solution to what's coming with regards to inflation, the energy crisis. The fact that Schultz runs to Canada to try to solve this, or Habeck lies about deals, phantom deals that he made with Qatar, shows that there's no real knowledge or interest to solve Germany's problems. But what happens to the rest of the European Union when Germany collapses, if and when the German economy collapses? And I don't mean France and Italy, the big countries. I mean every other country, even the hawkish countries that are really poking at the Russian bear, the Baltic countries, Poland, Czech Republic, all these countries that are really sticking it to Russia on a daily basis. I mean, really digging in, and travel bans, and we're going to train troops, and we need to send more weapons. What happens to all of these countries when everything starts to fall apart on an economic level?
Oh, it's going to be an enormous economic crisis.
Because as Germany goes, the EU goes. I just want to say that as Germany goes, the EU goes.
Absolutely. I mean, Germany is something like 40% of the EU's GDP. I mean, and if you're talking about Greater Germany, Austria and the Netherlands, all of the rest. I mean, I should say, when I say Greater Germany, I mean, the economic bloc that there is at the centre, which is dominated by Germany. I mean, it is a disproportionate part of the EU's GDP. Well, you're going to have an enormous recession, I mean, on a huge scale, and it's going to affect all of these countries. Now, the point is, given that the political leaderships of all these countries, you're right, by the way, to focus on the Baltic states, because there the situation is really bad. I mean, I understand, for example, that they've literally they're very close now to running out of energy completely. I mean, they've cut themselves off from Russian energy flows. They're not getting energy flows from other places. So they're in a very, very bad way, and their inflation rates are above 20%. So the risk is, the worry is, that with the kind of governments that they have in those countries, the kind of governments we see across the EU, which are very much part of the EU combinat, the kind of leadership we see in the European Commission, rather than change course, they will continue with the economic war, even as their economies collapse underneath them, and they will do what they have always done up to now, which is that they will clamp down even harder on dissident voices, but that they will do so on a scale the like of which we have never seen up to now. In other words, that there will be a massive attempt to clamp down politically on dissent, on protests, on strikes, on obviously what is said by people, and a sustained attempt to call any critic a Russian stooge, and perhaps conceivably to try to introduce laws to restrain that kind of critique. That I think is the danger, and I wouldn't just say the danger. It's probably the trajectory of travel, because you're absolutely right. If you're looking at the German political class, yes, there are dissident voices in Germany. There are dissident voices within the political class. There's people who are increasingly saying, let's turn on Nord Stream 2. If we can't get gas via Nord Stream 1, let's turn on Nord Stream 2. But only for a short time. Let's have a little gas coming via Nord Stream 2, fill up our reserves, get through the winter, and then we can switch it all off and go back to pretending that, we're imposing these kind of sanctions. That tells you, to my mind, that those dissident voices aren't really dissident voices. They show the provincialism of the German political class, their inability to think more broadly, to understand that the other side not only has its own ideas, but its own options. And given that they're not prepared to change course, they aren't able to change course, the danger is, as I said, that they will turn to more repressive methods. In fact, I wouldn't say it's a danger. I'd say it's an overwhelming likelihood.
Yeah, well, what makes them think that Russia would want to move gas through Nord Stream 2? I mean, it takes two to tango. They can say turn on Nord Stream 2, but Russia could say no. I mean,
but of course, absolutely.
Russia at the end of the day has to agree to that. But what about other countries outside of the let's focus on countries that
Yeah.
don't have a tendency for authoritarianism
Yeah.
per se. I mean, they've moved more authoritarian, but places like, say, Portugal, Spain, Cyprus, maybe the southern
Yeah.
European countries, these countries that aren't so invested in this let's destroy Russia narrative. I was going to say Greece, but Greece is invested. The government is fully on board. But, take Portugal, take Cyprus, take Spain for the most part.
Yeah.
They're not going to be Hungary. Hungary's a great example. They're not going to be up for this type of trajectory of the European Union, are they?
No, well, one would have thought not. But of course, what will probably happen is just as there'll be, an attack on internal dissenters within the EU states, so there will be an attack on dissenters within amongst the EU states. So you see more attempts to put pressure on countries like Hungary, on Greece, because I think there will at some point be a breaking point in Greece. Italy too. Bear in mind that all of these countries, apart from Hungary, have EU-compliant governments. I mean, Spain does, for example. You mentioned Spain. Portugal does. Italy, for the moment, still does. So, yes, there might be some pushback from there. But I think that as the people in Berlin and Brussels, and to some extent Paris, become increasingly desperate, the danger is that they will lash out. They will lash out at their critics internally, and they will lash out at their critics in the various member states. Now, taken too far, this could create a major crisis within the EU itself. You might conceivably see that collapse. We've all been looking, expecting for such a long time. But the damage that would be done in the meantime, even if that happened, would be immense. It would tear up the fabric of the European society. It would be an implosion. I've talked in the past about systems collapse. This would be systems collapse. Well, the nearest analogue I can think of was what happened to the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century. I mean, it would be a crisis of, on an enormous scale, with, a country that has been described as the external enemy at the gates. I have to say that I think that they will use the bogey of that enemy to try to hold things together. And it may be that they can, up to a certain point, succeed. And because that bogey is there, I think that will make it easier for them to go to lengths that they've never gone to up to this point. And I think we should be ready for that.
Well, they've also conditioned people to accept, say, the events of the last couple of years, which I won't mention, but everyone knows what I'm talking about. They've conditioned people to accept being locked down, being surveilled, having to, go out and about with papers or SMS text messages in order to go do various shopping activities or tasks. So the people have become, I think the European Union is betting on the fact that people have been preconditioned so that they can bring in this type of authoritarian rule while also using Russia as the excuse. Russia, climate change, energy crisis, all of these things together, I think they feel like they could get through this by keeping the people poor and down and struggling, but avoid any protests, something along the lines of, say, Sri Lanka. They can avoid a Sri Lanka event because they've done all of the European Union feels they've done all the preparation. Yeah, I think
you summed up the mood very, very clearly, actually. I think you're absolutely right. Now, of course, the point about that is that they can retain control. But, of course, what happens to Europe in the meantime is another matter, because, of course, the rest of the world will not be caught up in all of this. They will continue to progress. They will continue to move forward. Europe will become increasingly an economic backwater, as we've described. And of course, it will lose also whatever cultural and political attractiveness it once had. I mean, it's already diminished a lot, in my opinion, but it'll be diminished much further. It's an awful fate for the European people.
Yeah, but the U.S. can step in and take full control. They already have, for the most part, a dominant control over Europe. This would give the U.S., the neocons, the neoliberals, full control of Europe as a client region.
No,
that's not good for the U.S. taxpayer and for the American citizen because they're on the hook for all of Europe. But
I'm not disputing this.
100% subservient, dependent on America.
From the perspective of, if you like, the political class, I don't think it's the optimal outcome. I don't think that's what they want to achieve, but it's one that they would, settle for. I mean, they would much rather have that than lose control. Let me be very clear about this. That is, so, I mean, from their point of view, this draws a line in the sand. It means that they end up controlling what they control. But it's, in effect, if you do that, it locks Europe and the collective West into a world of backwardness. I mean, people talk about North Korea. The regime there has been very successful in keeping control, but nobody would look to North Korea as a model. I'm not saying we're going to go quite that far in Europe, well, you never know, but I mean, that's the kind of trajectory that we would be looking at. Survival in the short or medium term, success for the political class in the short and medium term does not translate into success for the West. It confirms failure. The Soviets found that to their cost, so will we.
Well, it took 70 years, but...
It took 70 years. Right. Yeah, well, I know, but, 70 years is a long time in the life of a human being. In terms of history, it's a blip.
Okay, we will leave it there. theduran.locals.com and go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Take care.